Hello, everyone, and welcome to your lecture, the second lecture on feminist theory. I'm very sorry that I'm not there. Hopefully, um, you have a sub or you have someone that is helping you at least get the information you need so you can complete these exercises. A lot of the work you're going to be doing for this class will be in our Canvas space. Um, the journal for today, do this on your own in your journal. Give yourself 10 minutes to do this exercise. Please provide a close reading of the Black Box, a short story we read for today. Remember, it's on pages 356 to 377 in the Norton Introduction to Literature. Please tell me who the protagonist is and any characteristics you see about the protagonist. Tell me who the antagonist is in your opinion, why you think that, and what the conflict is that the antagonist and protagonist are in. Talk about what literary elements are used. Talk about if there's anything used, especially with this story, that is in regards to form that makes you read the story in a certain way and how that affects you as a reader. So your homework for today was to answer questions about the poem Diving into the Wreck by Adrienne Rich. I've posted this as a discussion forum. So you've already done your homework, which is awesome. All you have to do is post your answers as part of this discussion forum. If you don't want to type them up, you can take a picture and upload your picture of your answers. But it needs to be legible so that we can interact with one another. So your homework by Tuesday is to upload your answers to these questions in regards to diving into the wreck, and then to respond to at least 3 of your peers' answers to their questions. Talk about, how they're different, how they're the same, and I will respond to your responses as well. So please post your responses. That way I know you've done the work, and then I can also give you feedback. As part of your posts, if you have questions about, maybe you couldn't answer one of the questions, maybe you didn't understand how how this operates in diving into the wreck, or maybe you had a very different opinion than someone else in the forum. Make sure you post that, and so that I can respond to you if you have a question. You can also send me emails if you have questions about anything in regards to this text. So I'm going to give you a brief lecture on the second part of the chapter, which is on minority feminists and the idea of queer theory. I think it's important to bring up when we talk about queer theory, and they do talk about this on page 111 in our text, but the idea that the term queer theory, the word queer had a real negative connotation for a long time, and it feels like a counterproductive term if you look at it at first glance. But as our book explains, that the use of the word queer and the kind of the taking back of that word, it's an indication to reverse the meaning of that term, and by that community, and thereby change the attitudes of society. And it's kind of like giving power back to that word and giving the power to the people who were deeply affected by that word. It's also a more inclusive term because it might be assumed, as it takes its subject matter as matter, that all sexual topics that are considered abnormal or odd, in other words, quote, queer, right, by the mainstream, this word challenges that idea, and it challenges the idea of traditional sexual identities. So when the feminist theory began, many are, started to take root and get momentum. Many minority feminists didn't align themselves with because they felt like it was primarily driven by white middle class women, especially African American feminists, because they face two forces of oppression. They face racism and sexism. A really powerful book was written by the critic Bell Hooks, who, just for your, as you look at that word, Bell Hooks, it looks like it's a typo, that her words are lowercase, but it's not. That's how she writes her name. She wrote a really important book called Ain't I a Woman? Black Women in Feminism. And in this book, she questioned how the white feminists were presenting feminism and added in all the issues that African American feminists also face, in addition to the issues that white feminists face. Um, so please make sure that you read through the chapter. This is in pages 110 to 111. There's a lot of information about this. The queer theory focuses on the LGBTQ community, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning community. And it really, the idea, the main idea behind this movement is to work against homophobia, and the idea of heterosexual privilege. So the idea of homophobia is people who are hateful or exclusionary to um, homosexuals of any kind. Heterosexual privilege is the idea of privileging heterosexual relationships over homosexual relationships. And one activity that I often have my classes do when I teach gender studies is, if you go to the aisle in like a supermarket or a card store and look at the cards, you can see that it is very rare when you find a same-sex a card that's made for same-sex couples. And it may seem like a very small thing, but if you're a same-sex couple, it's really, that's an example of heterosexual privilege, that your relationship is excluded from certain conversations, including Hallmark cards, right? So and if you look on television, it's the same thing. You start to look around you, where what is conceived as normal within society or in movies, or, it's the same idea we were talking about in regards to the idea of what feminine, being a woman is, what feminine is. So just over the next, few days, just look around and pay attention to when you see heterosexual privilege. The idea of essentialism is that the belief that a person's true identity is composed of fixed and unchanging properties, those that make one human. So the idea that when you are born a woman or a man, you are born with certain fixed things that do not change no matter what happens to you in your life. Social constructionists, they believe human identity is formed by the culture into which one is born. That means that the movies, the TV that you see, forms, as you're growing up, forms what you believe defines you in your gender. So the idea of what it means to be a man or a woman is constantly a changing concept. Now, Judith Butler, in her book Gender Trouble, says that identity is performative. That a person does what a person does at a particular time determines gender and identity. Identity is constantly moving among possibilities. She acknowledges that notions about gender are difficult to change because they're generally accepted without question to be naturally the way that they should be. And Butler calls for social action that will revise the norms in the masculine, feminine binary so that many genders and therefore identities are available and accepted. She speaks for queer theorists in general who want to destabilize assumptions about sexual identity, which they maintain is far more complicated than the simple binary of male and female. By doing so, they hope to weaken simplistic assumptions and reduce prejudices. So this is on page 112. This is where Judith Butler is talking about performative identity and the idea of sexual binaries. So the idea that individuals are not just male or female, but are instead a collection of many sexualities that may include various degrees of heterosexuality, homosexuality, or bisexuality. So sexual binaries argue that sexuality is a dynamic and changing thing. It's not a fixed thing. And what the main thing that queer theory is arguing is that heterosexuality cannot be viewed as the norm against which other sexual identities are always measured. All right, so today I ask you to read Black Box by Jennifer Egan, which is just a fascinating short story. You'll notice that it's written in the second person, so it kind of asks the reader to interact. You'll also notice that it's in a really interesting format. The idea of these 140 character groupings in these little black boxes. And then the concept of black box is actually included as part of the text as an actual thing that's mentioned in the text. So it's a really fun one to work with. What I've done is on Canvas, you'll see that you've been broken up into groups. Each of you has been assigned 2 to 3 questions. You'll see them listed below. Please answer the questions that have been assigned to you using evidence from Black Box to support what you say. Then please respond to at least 3 of your classmates who haven't answered the same questions as you and engage in a conversation. Okay? The idea is we're going to have a classroom conversation, but we're going to have it in on Canvas. Okay? If you have questions about this, please let me know. This is your homework to post your questions that you answered and your answers for diving into the rec, and then also to answer the questions and respond to your peers about the questions that they answer about Black Box by Jennifer Egan. All right, guys, that's it for today. Again, I apologize for not being there. Please email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you guys online.